Hello, everyone. This is Scott Kirkpatrick, owner and winemaker of Mountain Tides. Uh, we've got a fun little chat today. I'm going to be talking with Elaine Chukan Brown, the writer. So we're going to get started here in just a second. Here we go. Hang on. Thank you to everybody joining. Hey, Elaine.
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you too. It's been too long.
It has been. It's always great to follow your photos and stuff and see Dash online, but damn it, that dog needs to attack me. It's been a long time.
I know. He would graciously do that right now.
I know. He's such a sweetie that way.
He's definitely missing everybody, and he's turned a little he's making quarantine interesting and sometimes frustrating.
Yeah.
But
He's such an active dog. For those that don't know, Dash is not even a year old yet, right?
He just turned 1 in March.
Yeah. So he's super active and larger sized dog, and
Yeah.
It's a real sweetie though.
He is. We meet people in our neighborhood on our walks who know Dash but don't know us, because whenever they walk by our house, he introduces himself every time. So
that's cute.
That's
cute.
Well, just so everybody knows, what I wanted to go through today is, well, first of all, thanks everybody for checking this out. Excited to have everyone listen in. I'm very excited to have Elaine join today so we can talk about some Petite Sirah, and we're going to go through a few of our wines here at Mountain Tides. We'll start off with our California Petite Sirah, which is right here.
Yay!
And we'll also go through our Contra Costa Petite Sirah, as well as and finish things off with our Palmero family Petite Sirah. So if you want to follow along at home, please do. But that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. And before I go any further, just to remind everybody, we are doing a 30% off discount to folks in the healthcare industry. And you can even utilize that discount if you want to send some wine to your favorite nurse or doctor or somebody who is doing the good work that they're doing. So you can check out our website, www.mountaintideswine.com, and you should be able to see all that information there. But then, hopefully, I think probably most of you all know who Elaine is, but joining today is Elaine Chukan Brown, a wine writer, wine professional, speaker. She travels all over the world talking about wine. And one reason I wanted to have her here today is not only is she, I think, super thoughtful and insightful in the way that she approaches wine, but also she has such a kind of global perspective on California wine and where it fits in the context of everything. And so super excited to have you join, Elaine. I always love tasting with you and getting to spend time with you. So thanks for doing this.
No, thanks for asking me. I've been lucky enough to get to do some vineyard driving with you, which is great. I like seeing vineyards, even same vineyard again and again, but with different people, getting different perspectives. And I appreciate the time you've given me to get to taste with you and also, drive around the state. So That's one of the things that's cool about what you're doing. You get to have this real overarching understanding of what's going on in the state, but from a very specific perspective. It's really different than people doing an estate program with you sourcing fruit, but sourcing fruit in this thoughtful way, looking at vineyards where you admire the farming and are learning about a different place. It's just a really cool way to get insight about what's happening in California.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the most surprising parts of this project in general is how much, even just California history, I get to come across in looking for new vineyards, what towns we end up in that I would never have, never would have had a reason to even go through, let alone go to. And that's been a really wonderful part of Mountain Tides, traveling around with Allison, checking out new vineyards, or
Yeah.
in the times like when we got to go around that one day, uh, which was really fun. Uh, but
Bought lottery tickets in the foothills.
yes,
I did not win, by the way. I ended up, Scott and I pulled over and I bought lottery tickets for the hell of it in the foothills. And the guy I bought them from promised me I was going to win, but he wanted me to come back and share the earnings and like hunker down with him if I did. And turns out he's not my man because I did not win. So I have not gone back.
well, he was at least he was shooting his shot, you know.
It was pretty funny. Well, the thing that was ridiculous was I was like confused about what was even going on. I was like, what was that guy talking about? And Scott was like, I think he was flirting with you.
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
like, oh, yeah,
Sorry, San Andreas guy.
yeah.
But well, how are you doing, Elaine? How is time in the quarantine, self-isolation?
It's been okay. I mean, the big thing is we have what we need, you know, and
Right.
I just think that's the most important thing. We have what we need, and the truth is that, you know, if you step back and ask what's appropriate to feel or think in the midst of all this, well, the whole damn range of thoughts and feelings is appropriate in a situation like this. You know, I mean, I think it's easy sometimes especially in our culture, for people to be hard on themselves, to think we're supposed to like always look for the bright side or always find the blessing. And it's like, yeah, man, you know, do look for the blessings, do be grateful, and recognize the truth is, I don't know if I'm allowed to use the F word on your live
Yeah,
stream.
why not?
The truth is we're in a really fucked situation. So the full range of
Yeah,
emotions actually means we're paying attention, you know?
totally.
And so that's been the thing. Like, the truth is I've had full range of moods and feelings, and I just think that means I'm actually paying attention to what's going on. So
Yeah, yeah. If you are paying attention, you can't help but have some little bit of despair from time to time, I think. But what have you picked up any new hobbies or doing anything new like so many folks out there are?
well, it turns out the way I've had to make a big pivot with work, and luckily was asked to do some webinars on California wine. And so I've been able to like make enough income for rent and food that way. But the turns out I've gotten really good at Zoom, which is a little disheartening. You know, I actually did a crazy Zoom in Japanese last night.
Whoa,
Morning for them, evening for me. It took 3 translators. I had 2 different headsets on, and I was listening to 2 different things simultaneously while focusing on video like we're doing now, and reading a secret chat screen just set up for me to help me understand everything going on. And I actually pulled it off. So I'm
that's
like,
awesome.
I have gotten really good at this, you know?
That's one for the resume.
Yeah, no, seriously, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, actually. And I've done lots of hard things. So, yeah, so I don't know that counts as a hobby, but it's how I've been spending my time.
That's a new skill, certainly.
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely would have never expected to have to be good at conference calling.
Well,
But
it's a unique thing, right? Because you got to figure out how to make it feel personable, even though you're looking at yourself on screen, which, let's be real, is awkward as hell, you
yeah,
know? And then you got to figure out, how do I have a conversation that feels real and is tangible? And a lot of that, you know, it's a weird trick of picking other people that are comfortable, and then getting them comfortable with you, you know?
yeah, totally.
So,
Uh, it's I can say that having somebody like you join in the video makes it much easier than when I did one where I was um, so it's nice to actually have somebody you can have a
yeah, it's
conversation
awful,
with.
right? No, seriously, when I've gotten on live myself, I've been like, and I'm an idiot, and I'm a dork ball, and I don't want to look at myself, and am I frozen? Yes, I am. Both in my soul and on screen. It's like, nah. So yeah, it's a lot better to do a live with someone you enjoy talking to.
Absolutely. Well, we don't want to take. Let's get moving or get started talking about some wine stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you already know I think this, but your California, it's freaking banging, and the value is absurd.
Thank you.
I just think it's important to note what you've pulled off with the price of the wine. You're making a wine that is instantly drinkable and delicious and fresh, and yet still has some chops for aging, but at an incredible price.
Yeah. Yeah, it was that was something that was, why we decided to do the California Petite Sirah. Again, this beautiful photo on the front is from Allison, my wife, who makes all of this look good.
Yeah.
But the reason we decided to do it in the first place was that, kind of me thinking, coming from, I started in restaurants and learning about wine. I always really liked the model that they did in Burgundy. Primary Cru vineyards, special, the Village wines where they're, this is from this area, so this is going to be indicative of this place, this kind of greater sense of this place. And then you have your bigger, the Burgundy labeled bottles, which is, a huge range of different vineyards, different sites, but really trying to capture the idea of a place more than, from a terroir perspective, more than the actual place. And doing that in a way that is as affordable as possible. Because, when I was learning about wine, I had very little income and didn't have the money to buy expensive bottles. So I got most of my wine for a long time at this liquor store down the street from me called Liquor World, which had very, very simple, very probably internationally distributed wines. But that's how I learned. And so I wanted to be able to make a wine that would have been possible for younger me to buy during that time.
Yeah.
And I'm super glad that we were able to pull it off, because, as you know, making affordable wine in California is actually really hard.
Yeah.
Especially given, when we give ourselves some constraints where we, are only working in vineyards that are, practicing organic practices in the vineyard, and not wanting to manipulate the wine at all outside of minimal sulfur use. It definitely adds a few layers of complications onto it.
Yeah. No, it's really challenging to make wine at this price point. Can you say again in the U.S. the suggested retail?
It's $20 in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, $20, and making a California wine at a $20 price range is really genuinely challenging. The costs here are just very high, and one of the things I admire about this wine too, though, is that it's, it truly is a California wine. You have, remind me, Dry Creek Valley, Sierra Foothills, Contra Costa, all going into this, right?
Yeah, so this one is all the vineyards we worked with in 18, except for one of the vineyards that we picked for rosé. So there's a Contra Costa vineyard in here. There's 2 different vineyards from Lodi, Dry Creek Valley, and that might be it for the 18, because we didn't have the Sierra Foothills fruit until 19.
Right, that's right, yeah. Yeah,
but we're getting close to doing the 19, and there will be, I think, 9 different vineyards in that one.
Yeah, which is really exciting. I mean, one of the things I think it's important, with what you're doing to talk about is the history of Petite Sirah too, and just stylistically, you're treating the grape very differently than is more, so if you'll
Right.
forgive me going on a historical interlude for a second. Is that okay? Yeah. So, I mean, so
Please
Petite
do.
Sirah arrives in California in 1890. Yeah, so Petite Sirah arrives in California in 1890. It's not even really discovered in France till a decade or two prior to that. We now know it was sort of an accidental cross between Pellerson and Syrah. And until the 1996, we actually didn't know for sure what Petite Sirah was.
Right.
It had actually quickly proliferated across the northern half of California from the coast to the foothills, but as an interplanted variety in the old mixed blacks field blends. And it was actually this really important component with our mixed blacks field blends. Those tended to have a heart of Zinfandel, but then our second accent was Petite because it brings great color, great structure. But it wasn't until the early 90s that California actually bottled 100% Petite Sirah wine ever in the whole history of the state. It was always thought of as a field blend add-in. And then in 96, Carol Meredith, here at UC Davis, figures out the parentage of Petite Sirah. And
Right.
in fact, that a lot of Petite Sirah plantings really were mixed in with Pellerson and Syrah. So we really had actually been calling 3 different varieties Petite Sirah together. But the thing about Petite as itself is it has tended to make really tannic wine. And so through the 90s, when we're getting started making Petite Sirah wines on their own, a lot of people say, oh, this wine's so tannic, we need to let it hang longer so the tannins will resolve on the vine. And so you ended up, Petite got associated with these really inky, dark, really full-bodied, mouth-filling, very tannic wines. And actually what we've more recently discovered is that Petite, the fruit, is not highly tannic. It's actually moderately tannic, but the tannin is in a highly extractable form. So actually the whole thing is that you need to be really careful in the cellar, and you can pick it at a, otherwise normalish time. But if you're careful in the cellar, you can make a more, modestly tannic wine. And I tell that whole quick history just because, part of what I'm so excited about with what you're doing is that you're taking this variety that's had relative obscurity. You're taking it seriously, but you're also exploring what's possible with it by pulling back on extraction. And what I see in your wines is that when you pull back on extraction and pull back on picking, you get this incredibly aromatic expression, even in a young wine,
Yeah. Yeah, that's certainly what I feel like we get from it. And I did a little bit. I think for so long, so many wineries, especially in the 90s when petite bottling started to happen. At that point, Cabernet is so huge, and so many people are kind of doing a one-size-fits-all winemaking approach to darker skinned grapes. And so they're trying to maximize color and flavor out of these Cabernet grapes, and then when they do the same thing to Petite Sirah, you get this intense, extraction color-wise, but also with the tannin. And then, a lot of, as you said, they're letting it hang on the vine until sugar accumulates to these, pretty aggressively high levels, hoping to cook the tannin out of it. But even if they're successful in doing that, I think a lot of those wines, they ended up cooking a lot of the aromatics and flavor out of it as well.
Right.
And I appreciate lighter, fresher wines in general. And I honestly didn't even know if it was possible to do it well, or if it would go well if we did it. But thankfully, it's turned out pretty good, and we find that it's just a really interesting wine, and you can preserve all those fresh aromatics, and it's something I'm really excited about.
Yeah, it's cool. I should clarify, I misspoke. I said the first time California bottled Petite on its own was the 90s. That's actually not true. It gets started in the first half of the more like 40s and 50s, but it's that it took off. People started intentionally bottling it on its own in the 90s. I realized I misspoke there, but Drew just asked if either of us have funny stories about getting stained by Petite Sirah. So I'll tell a quick one. In 2016, I did harvest both in California and in Oregon, but in both places I was mainly only working with Pinot and Chardonnay and a little bit of.
Uh-huh.
But so like 2 weeks in, I'm exhausted. I've been doing harvest, and I look down at my hands, and they're not stained at all. I'm like super pissed. I'm like, I could tell I've been working because I've been shoveling out like whole cluster tanks and crazy stuff, but Pinot doesn't really stain your hands, and so
No.
I was super irritated. I'm like, come on, I'm about to go out to dinner with somebody that's not been doing harvest. I gotta look like I've been working. And so I'm like joking about this, and the harvest he's like, oh, just go next door. I was in an urban winery setting. He's like, just go to the winery next door. They work with Petite. And so I walked around the corner, and I'm like, hey, where's your Petite tank? And I just like doused my hands a little bit, and like rubbed it in, and like, boop, there you go, black hands.
That's all it
But
takes.
you can see
Yeah.
even from the just opening the cork, I've got grape stains.
It is definitely, the color is so powerful with Petite, but I think it's so you have you write for your Hawk Waka Waka wine reviews, but you also write for plenty of other publications, including Jancis Robinson, and so I think that you did the Global Expo with her back before the quarantine
export
happened.
in 20. Yeah.
And so that's with writing for a publication based in England, you do the American wines mostly, if I'm not mistaken. Where do you see Petite Sirah fitting in now in the kind of like the global context of wine?
Well, I mean, the truth is it's a known but obscure variety would be a way to put it. The greatest planting concentration of it in the world is California. It of course originates in southern France, and both of its parents come from the northern Rhone. But the challenge with Petite Sirah is it's susceptible to bunch rot. It doesn't do well in humidity during the growing season, and France, of course, still gets rain in summer. And so it's any varieties that are susceptible to either powdery mildew or bunch rot aren't going to do well in France. So there's a number of varieties that originate in France but don't really develop a reputation until they come to California, and Petite Sirah is one of the main ones. And the reason is very simple. All our rain is in winter.
Right.
And so during the growing season, it's dry, and so a variety like Petite, where the bunches are kind of tightly clustered, it can stay dry between the berries, So it's mainly taken hold in California. Interestingly, with climate change, some people in France are doing very small experimental plantings to see if bringing Petite Sirah back might make sense. So I'm trying to keep an eye on that, but people aren't talking about it that much. So because France is a little more traditional that way, and so it's an interesting phenomenon, though, right? For see a variety go back to its home and see what might happen. But then the other two places where it really does have a foothold, or it's actually been interest in it is increasing in Israel.
Okay.
I don't know a lot about it, but there actually there's some really nice Petite Sirah being made in Israel, and then actually there's a modest but goodly amount being grown in Australia, except under its original name, Darif. So
Right.
some IEC just asked a little bit ago, why is it spelled Sirah, Sirah? And actually, at the time that Petite Sirah got established in California in the 1890s, it came in known as Darif, not actually known. Its origins were not very well known at the time, but it got marketed here as Petite Sirah. And the truth is, we haven't been able to solve why that name. And so we also can't answer why that spelling, because it was a way. I mean, I think the simple answer is there's ways of distinguishing it from actual Syrah,
Right.
but we didn't really confirm all of its parentage until recently. So and we haven't been able to figure out. This guy that brought it over Charles McIver, he promoted it and successfully spread it through some of the best vineyards in California. It was at Inglenook, it was in Tokelon, but they bought the cuttings as Petite Sirah. McIver for some reason changed its name, but we haven't found out why that name.
Yeah, I actually had it when I was originally thinking about doing Mountain Tides and doing a kind of a lighter Petite Sirah. One of the things that really compelled me was thinking about some of the older Petite Sirah wines. I had a bottle of Inglenook's, I think 1976 Petite Sirah.
Yeah.
And it was just so fresh still and had aged so well. But I was just thinking about, back in especially the 70s, 80s, the wines were not being made as big and as rich as they are now. And those wines are living for a long time. So that was kind of one of my thought processes originally was, they were picking Petite Sirah, probably, 22 to 24 bricks, somewhere in there, back in the 70s, and making these wines that age and are beautiful. It has to be possible.
Yeah. Well, I know like Tegan Passalacqua, the work that he does, he just works with a little bit of Petite Sirah, but he works with a lot of historic varieties, right? But he's been really inspired by those older California Petite Sirahs as well. And one of the things that's really unique about the variety is how it ages, because I think what about Nebbiolo, we're used to thinking about the incredible transformation that Nebbiolo has in the bottle, especially with Barolo and Barbaresco. We're used to the idea that this wine becomes something very different when it's older, and that its age is beautiful. With some varieties, it just becomes older, right? But Nebbiolo, we're used to the idea that age makes it beautiful. And the truth is that Petite Sirah is very much that kind of wine as well, where as it ages, sort of its tendency towards rustic tannin and its tendency towards brawn kind of melts away, and it becomes floral and really beautiful and elegant, and it just transforms into a completely different wine with time in bottle. And so if people can find like older Inglenook Petite, like you mentioned, older Ridge Petite, there's a lot of some of the producers that make really incredible nicely aging Petite Sirah unfortunately aren't making it anymore or don't exist anymore. But like one of the great historic vineyards is York Creek from Napa Valley, really beautiful wine. Like keep an eye out for names like that, and because those wines age incredibly well, and they've really inspired a lot of like people like you and people like Tegan to rethink these varieties that sort of got disregarded through the hefty wine phase of the 90s and early aughts,
Yeah, totally.
But your Contra Costa, let's look at that.
When you get into the higher sugar levels, you're going to start seeing a little bit of bunch rot. Even it's not necessarily a problem, but in small doses. But I wasn't seeing any of it, and it looked really similar to the fruit that I pick for rosé, which are just these beautiful, immaculate clusters. Because you only have 20 bricks of sugar in them.
Right, yeah.
But so we got it to the vineyard, and instead of being 25, it was 20.5 after I'd sent it to the lab. And I was like, okay, we've got to make some tough decisions here because you can't put the fruit back on the vine. And so it's like we split it up into 3 different fermentations. One we did about 75% whole cluster. One we did 33%, so about a third whole cluster, and the other one we did totally destemmed. And just because it was like, if we're gonna do something different, let's find out what is possible, what we can do here.
Yeah.
And the one with the most whole cluster in it, that was about 3/4 whole cluster, turned out to be just so beautiful and so aromatic, and obviously had gone through quite a bit of carbonic maceration, because we don't ever inoculate the fermentations. And so the native fermentation started, but even before that, we had gotten a good amount of carbonic going. So we kind of, I pulled 2 barrels out of that eventually, and bottled that as our 2018 carbonic Petite Sirah, or partial carbonic Petite Sirah. And then those other 3 fermentations, well, the other 2 fermentations we still had. And then I talked to the grower. I was like, hey, we just started working together. I want this to be a good relationship. This obviously isn't what we had talked about or what we had planned, but just want to make sure that, we're good moving forward, and that we can make sure things happen a little bit better next time. And, he was like, I can give you a discount on the fruit, or I can give you maybe a little bit more fruit, a little bit of fruit for free, in a couple of weeks when the sugars have accumulated more. And I was like, well, the discount doesn't help, so let's do a little bit more fruit at a little bit higher bricks. So we picked again at like 24.5, 25, I think. And so this wine is a blend of all 4 of those fermentations.
Okay. No, that's so cool though, because I mean, when I taste the wine, I'm like, what is going on here? Because there's this, it's just a really interesting wine. There really is this kind of loamy marine element to it that I find really fascinating to see in Petite. And there's also this way that it like melts and spreads across the palate, which tends for me to correlate with that kind of really fine-grained sandy soil that you get out there in Contra Costa. But then there's also this sort of multi-tonal layering of flavors and aromatics, where there's this like really like brooding, deep, dark toned fruit, not heavy, but then all the way up to like, very high tone, bright floral aromatics. And so it's especially after the California Petite, which has plenty of complexity, but is also maybe more centrally fruit delivering, but whereas this has that this stratification of tonal flavors. That's really fascinating to see. And then it has this kind of intensity and lightness at the same time in terms of weight, and it's hard to get that kind of combination in a wine where you have intensity but without heaviness,
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. That was when I was putting together the blend, so to speak, of the different lots that I've been working with. It's all the same vineyard, it's all the same grape, but we're blending together the different fermentations. I wasn't sure if we were even going to be able to use all of it, or what was going to work, what wasn't. But when we kind of took a little bit from each fermentation, it just kind of, I was like, man, I really was very excited about how it, it certainly had some of the brightness of the partial carbonic, but it added in so many more layers to it that was just very exciting from my perspective, to have a wine that still that I think represents the place of Contra Costa more than the carbonic does, because that to me is more representative of a process. This I think tastes like Contra Costa to me, while still having lots of depth and having and being, I think, a really pretty wine.
Well, because for me, the Contra Costa shows up with, again, that loamy marine element. It's almost seaweedy. That not quite, but it's almost that kind of, iodine seaweed thing. But then also that really fine grained tannin. Those are so Contra Costa to me.
Yeah, I know one.
But I mean, the thing is, having it with that low, this pretty modest alcohol too, which is again really cool to see on this variety. Like 12.5 is what the label says.
Yep. And this one, for those of you who are curious, this one is the U.S. retail, and this is $34 a bottle.
Drew asked a little bit ago if Petite is as good as a mountain variety, and it absolutely, the thing with Petite and a mountain planting, it tends to make a really chiseled wine, and
really
you're,
careful.
Yeah, could you tell us about that a little bit? You have started working with Petite from Sierra Foothills. How did that differ from something like this Contra Costa fruit?
Yeah, so working on, there's a couple aspects that I learned, had to learn, not necessarily the hard way, but got a crash course on in 2019. We started working, 2018, we worked with our first vineyard that was really in any elevation, which is the Grist Vineyard, which is about 1,000 feet in elevation. But then in 2019, we started working with Rourke Heritage Vineyard in Calaveras County in Murphys, which is about 2,000 to 2,200 feet. And then Shake Ridge Ranch, which I believe is about 1,400 feet.
Yeah.
And both of those vineyards not only are higher elevation, but they both have a good amount of aspect to them. The Shake Ridge has some aspect to one of the blocks and not to the other so much, but Rick has a wild aspect. It's Elaine, you've been
Crazy
there.
steep. So it's crazy steep, yeah. And
there
tons
are parts
of schist there too. So
tons
really
of schist,
unique.
And very slippery if you're walking down the hill with all that schist. But that there are parts of that vineyard that feel Mosel-like in the steepness and in the aspect. But it's a really cool vineyard if any of you get to check it out sometime. But with mountain fruit, I think you generally get, you're above the fog line, you get more intense sun exposure, and the grapes end up producing their own kind of sunscreen. They thicken up their skins, and the thickening of the skins, they produce the chemical, or not chemicals, but the process of doing that can produce a lot more tannin in the skin, and tannin that's easy to extract. And so you have to be very careful with it. I found otherwise it can get very tannic very easily, much more than somewhere like Contra Costa or like Lodi.
Right.
But it also presents a really interesting problem when you talk about sampling the vineyard, because
of course.
The soil depth level, so the amount of soil you have at the bottom of the slope is going to be significantly different than the amount of soil you have at the top of the slope because of erosion over time. Obviously, the soil goes downhill, and up at the top of the slope, you generally have really, really shallow soils. You don't have much vigor there, and so that can really affect sugar ripeness. And so, like with Rourke this year, that's the toughest vineyard I've ever had to sample. But
right, just because it's so steep and varied.
Yeah, it's so steep, so varied. But and I know I've talked to, I think even the day we were out together, the day we went to Rourke, we talked to Craig Harmeyer, and he was saying that he's had multiple times where he's tried to sample that vineyard, and it's come back when he picks, a week or two later, it's 2 or 3 picks lighter than he had sampled it.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. I mean, because it would, that Petite slope, it's so unbelievably steep, and the elevation climb is significant between the top and the bottom. And so the ripening curve across that slope would be really hard to nail all on one pick,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we're not picking enough to, for most of these vineyards, we've started out very small. We're trying to grow little by little. So we're not doing huge, we're not picking 6 tons or we're not really picking enough to spread things out.
Yeah, totally.
And pick here, same with Shake Ridge. But the Shake Ridge was a whole different beast for us in 19, where we waited. The sugar ripening just didn't happen in that vineyard for a long time. We didn't pick it until Halloween. It was the last fruit to come into the winery, and we were the first pick with our carbonic and the last pick with that Shake Ridge pick. Waiting until Halloween, and the sugars were only at 23 bricks, so still on the light side for Petite Sirah. I was definitely getting some side eye from some of the folks in the winery of like,
Yeah.
all the Napa Cabernet is in. Why is your Shake Ridge Petite Sirah not in yet? But that wine is just that I'm very excited for that wine.
Yeah. No,
It's
I
so
can't wait to
floral,
get.
so pretty.
I can't wait to get back
But
in barrel taste. But we got to talk
yeah,
about Lodi.
yeah. Let's talk about Palmero. So our Palmero family vineyard Petite Sirah, very special wine for me. It is Lodi. It's from the Board and Ranch AVA, not necessarily a super popular common AVA outside of, it's not one that's labeled, I guess, very often.
Yeah,
But
well, a lot of the Sirah family vineyard you're working with, it's pretty usual for Board and Ranch because a lot of Board and Ranch is actually planted into larger size vineyards, but this is this like
yeah,
small family owned little parcel in that area, so it's actually quite a special little spot.
it is. It's the original home vineyard of kind of an old school Lodi grower named Gerald Cresci. He planted the one and farmed it himself until he passed away a couple years ago when he was about 92 and had been farming it himself that whole time.
Yeah.
The Palmeros, Melody, and Gary came in and bought the property. They had known Gerald through different wine organizations that they were part of because they were big fans of wine, and Gary was making his own wine. So when they got the chance to buy this vineyard that Gerald had planted and been farming, they jumped at it. And I think actually today is the 5-year anniversary of them buying the property. But,
Right. Well, and some people probably know Cresci for Shannon too.
Yes.
That's something. The site essentially has Petite and Shannon on it, and so some have seen it bottled as Cresci, but as Shannon.
Yeah, especially with Craig Harmeyer.
Yeah.
I know. What's his name? Nathan Candler used to make.
Yeah, he made a killer precedent Shannon from the same site. Craig's working with that fruit now. But and one of the things when you and I were walking the, what's now Palmero family, the Petite, we realized it was actually mixed through with Pellerson. There's probably like 5 to 10% Pellerson vines mixed into the Petite Sirah. But again, until 96, that's just how things were. People would take Petite cuttings, and actually they were getting a kind of varietal mix when they were establishing vineyards that way.
Yeah, so and nobody knew any different at the time.
Yeah. So Mark Bianco just asked if Petite always has the peppery profile. I think that this wine is a great example of showing the peppery side of Petite without having it be bigger or riper. But you don't always get that. Like it wouldn't have occurred to me to call your California Petite or your Contra Costa Petite peppery.
No.
It seems to be site specific but also probably based on ripeness as well. I think the riper the wine gets, the more peppery it gets.
Totally, and I think it also depends. At least my experience, like our Grist Vineyard, is also quite a bit more peppery than some of our other ones. Not to the point where you get like the Syrah pepperiness, but I think I have a sinking suspicion that it also has to do with the amount of time it takes for the sugar to ripen. So I think it happens in some vineyards that you get a little bit more pepperiness in vineyards that ripen a little bit slower, I think.
That's what I was wondering if it what I've noticed is it seems to correlate with wines that come in later, but it didn't just be connected to Paul. And I was also wondering, do you see it more or less in the mountain vineyards? Does it correlate with skin thickness at all, or no?
I haven't seen that correlation. Like that Shake Ridge. Even ripened really slowly, I don't really get much pepperiness out of that now. We'll see when how the aging goes on that, but I see it most in the Grist Vineyard for sure. Which that's a really interesting vineyard because that also has really huge discrepancies of ripeness, not on the, not as much in the slope, but on the north and south sides of the vines, due to how the row orientation is. So on the one side of the vine is getting much different sunlight, so it's getting much more morning sun, whereas the other side is getting much more afternoon sun. But and so that could be part of it. It could be connected to whole cluster inclusion, stem inclusion, but I'm doing between probably 30 to 50% whole cluster on almost every wine we do. So even the California is probably an average of 35-40% whole cluster. But
so go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think to me, this is the first vineyard that we ever bottled as a vineyard designate, which is, I think, significant for us. It's a really unique site. As Elaine said, it's extremely unique from all the vineyards around it in that area, but it's also, I think, just a really unique site in that you've got some older vine material, planted in 1981. So, we're coming up on 40-year-old vines, not old vine in the sense of like a heritage vineyard, but you do have I think, an interesting small amount of interplanting happening there with the Pellerson. I haven't sent that off to the lab or anything, but just based off of the ampelography, checking out the leaves and the cluster morphology, that the clusters are structured a lot differently than a normal Petite Sirah vine. The leaves look the exact same in shape, but they differ in texture and color a little bit. But also it has a really interesting, it's really interesting that in this spot, it has an afternoon wind that comes through and like dries out the vineyard. So there's really no threat of powdery mildew, which is rare, and also allows the palmeras where they don't have to spray anything in the vineyard whatsoever, which is a huge plus for us. We love that. They also don't till the vineyard at all, so keeping that soil nice and fertile by allowing it to not exposing it to the air, releasing all the carbon.
It keeps it cool and slows down the ripening curve of the vines a little bit too.
Yeah. But then there's also 7 or 8 eucalyptus trees growing around the vineyard, which to me are not overpowering at all in the eucalyptus flavor. I don't know if you don't know, eucalyptus trees or eucalyptus leaves have eucalyptus oil all over them, and it's one of the only compounds that I know of that when it sinks into the soil, the vine will actually uptake it and translate it directly into the flavor of the wine.
Yeah, so they've done studies that actually prove that this is true, but the kind of general belief is that resinous herbs and trees in general will do this. So bay, people feel bay has a similar sort of effect. We know for sure eucalyptus does, like in Central Otago, there's tons of wild thyme that grows everywhere, and you can really you can get that in the wines from that region too. But
that makes sense.
I love it because it's just little like freshening aspect, just like a hint, a little accent on the wine. So Mark asked too if Petite's being bottled more commonly as 100% varietal wine or in blending, and the truth is that there's not a lot of people that bottle pure Petite Sirah, and that's true in the whole world. But it's actually widely planted across California because it's commonly blended with Cabernet. It still appears in Zinfandel field blends. The new category that's emerged of just the red blend, Petite plays a huge role in those. And so it's actually, in terms of volume, it's more commonly appears as a hearty blending element.
I think for most, I think there's a staggering amount of Napa Cabernet out there with a good amount of Petite Sirah in it.
That's right.
Petite Sirah has like such great texture. It has great, it has a density to it, especially when you grow it and ripen it to higher sugar levels. But it also has so much color that sometimes Cabernet doesn't have. So it's often used
Well, and I feel like
almost as a color correction.
right. In blend, it, in my mind, Petite like fills in all the creases. You know, it's like you pour a little Petite in and it just seeps through everything and fills in all the gaps and just makes that denser, darker core of wine to it.
Absolutely. And it's, you know, it's especially in the field blends, obviously it's interplanted with a lot of Zinfandel, but even people who aren't doing co-ferments from the vineyard are doing, you know, interplanted vineyards. They're blending a lot of Petite Sirah with Zinfandel because it does seem to fill in a lot of the cracks that Zinfandel can have. But that's very, very common. I think it's the rarity is the bottling it 100% variety because I think there typically hasn't been, there's been a little bit of a market for it, but not as much. And the market that's been there traditionally has been for the darker, inkier, at least in the last 10, 15 years. The version of it that is more known around here, because I think so many people think that
that's just what it does.
Inkiness, and that's what makes it interesting. Whereas my thoughts are that that's actually what makes it less interesting. And that it has all these other unique things about it with, you know, it's, you know, it does have, you know, this moderate tannin if you extract it properly, but also it has really high acidity, which people don't think about, and can be very floral and very, very pretty when treated properly. But that's just not normally how it's made.
Right.
Got somebody asking if Petite is more of a thin skin grape. It's definitely considered one of the thicker skin grapes. Not as thick as some, but the thing that really gives Petite Sirah so much color in a fermentation is the fact that the grapes are actually so small. The actual berries are very small and very densely packed onto the cluster. I like to sometimes think that they look like clusters that have taken steroids. They have this kind of like muscly, intense look to them that you don't really see with other clusters. And the reason the grapes are so, you know, the reason you have bunch rot is because the grapes are so densely packed that as they grow, they start to pop each other, and you get, you know, this juice sitting out, starting to decompose, and that's where the mold comes in.
Right. Do you know what time it is, by the way? I can't see on my phone.
I think we got 5 minutes to 3.
Okay, so one of the things, you did not intend to talk about this, but we got to address your rosé.
Oh yeah.
And Tony actually popped on earlier and asked about, you know, if we, because he's, you know, it's pretty unusual to see Petite Sirah rosé, so forgive me for hijacking.
No, please do.
But I just think, you know, what you do with rosé and Petite Sirah is something that should be mentioned, and I love the freshness of it. I also love that you've done some regional Petite Sirah rosés. You know, one of my favorite wines that you've made is actually the rosé that you made from Clements Hills, which is also Lodi.
Right.
And so, like, the idea that rosé could be site expressive is so exciting to me. But then that Petite Sirah rosé turns out to be site expressive, like, woo, yeah, fuck yeah, you know, super cool. But now again, like, what's the retail on the California rosé?
It's retail on that is same as the California red, so that's $20 US. That is, you know, I love doing the 2 different rosé that were very, very expressive of place. And I didn't know if that was going to be the case, if they would be expressive. They turned out to be so different from each other.
So different. Yeah.
The Clements Hills from Lodi was so linear, so direct, had lots of like minerality, chalkiness to it. Yeah. That I did not expect. There really wasn't much fruit to speak of. Maybe like a little bit of frozen strawberry quality to it, but and then the other set. But that's also coming from pretty dense red clay soils. And then the Contra Costa rosé that we did, you know, coming from much sandier soils, was extremely floral. It's very generous in flavor and aroma. Lots of floral and stone fruit qualities. And this year, we really wanted to do another wine to kind of companion with the California Red, something that would be
Yeah.
a wine that was priced at a point where we could have it hopefully by the glass at restaurants, at a nice simple price at $20. It's an easy number to wrap your head around, I hope. And again, not an easy thing to do to make wine at that price, but we hope that we can grow, like make a little bit more of
Yeah.
that so that it makes more sense for us. And thankfully, we're still only working with those two vineyards still for that wine, but the blend of those sites actually came together beautifully to where I
Yeah.
think you get that beautiful brightness of the Clements and a little bit of that minerality with the fruit and floral qualities in the flavor as well.
No, it's super cool that way because it definitely, yeah, you definitely get that like chalky traction, mineral element where it just like grabs the tongue just a little bit, but then it's this like friendly wee boo boo, sort of popping in the mouth kind of. So like to have those like, I'm fun but serious, it's like I'm friendly but I'm gonna talk to you, sort of combo. Um, so it's just like I could drink the crap out of this wine, and
Oh,
I'll
thank
like
you.
drink it and like have a party. But then if I'm by myself and I'm having feelings and I need to think about stuff, I'll be like, this will make me feel better, So yeah, kind of hits the range, which is great.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Instagram is telling me we got a minute left, so
Oh, a minute left.
we can wrap things up. But thank you so much, Elaine, for hanging out and talking Petite Sirah with me.
I'm so grateful for you asking. It's real. I mean, honestly, it's really good to see you, and
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
I'm thrilled about what the two of you are doing, and I really genuinely wish you all the best luck and hope just hope it keeps going well. So yeah,
Well, thank you.
happy to chat like this. Very happy to.
All right, and for all of you out there, just remember you can check out the website mountaintideswine.com. Hopefully if you have the ability, feel free to buy some wine. We are doing that 30% discount for folks in the healthcare industry, or if you're buying wine for somebody in the healthcare industry. But yeah, and I'm going to be talking tomorrow to Joel Burt from Las Jarras Wines at 5 p.m. PDT. So yeah, tune in if you can. Thanks, Elaine.
Thanks a lot. Take good
All
care.
right. See y'all later. Be well.
Okay.